All right. Well, Yuval and Steve, thank you so much for participating in this conversation. Very excited to dig into the film and talk about both the story and the production and everything behind the scenes. The visuals, the story, everything was extremely captivating and dynamic. So I think to start off, I'm just curious to know what the genesis of this project was for you all, how it came together. And maybe we'll start with you, Yuval, from your perspective as the director.
Well, it's actually a script that I read like 10 years ago when I had a period that after my first film, I was reading scripts. There's this Hollywood moment where they send you a bunch of scripts, and I read this one. I really liked it. I was pitching myself to the producer, and they, you pitch yourself as a director, and they didn't take me. They take somebody else. And that was like 2014 or 15. And that was it. But then every 2 or 3 years, I was like, wait a minute, I don't see that this movie is made. This movie should be made. And I kind of look at IMDb, it's not made. So I emailed the producer every 2 years, like, what's up with Sympathy? And they're like, we're waiting. It's this, it's internal, blah, 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 like that kind of stuff. And then end of 2021, I emailed, just like again, out of boredom and, emptiness due to COVID, I emailed and they said, we lost the right to the script. It went back to the writer. So I was like, really interesting. And then I approached the writer and convinced him to sell me the rights. And then my manager was also a producer here. Stuart Manashil is one of the, like him and Alex Sedovici, they worked, there really was a big effort to put it together. It happened really, really fast. But for me, it was like a script that I read and just tracked. And suddenly it became available.
Very cool. Steve, how did you get involved with the project? What did that process look like for you, or what attracted you to the film?
Yuval and I met on the phone, and we talked through his vision for it, and some of the major themes, truth and lies, and reality and fiction and vengeance, and some of these other big things that play through the film. And I was really captivated by that. I was captivated by his approach. Correct me if I'm wrong, Yuval, but you wanted to do something bold and unique and take big swings with the movie, and that captivated me as well. And then the third part was that there was this big technological challenge right at the beginning. The producers told me this was going to be done on a volume, and it's a pretty significant part of the movie in a volume in a car, and that was something that I hadn't taken on at this scale. That was compelling for me. And so those three components made it the right decision, and Yuval and I hit it off. And that's always, one of the most important things is that you have a special relationship with the director and feel the same meat in the story. And from there, we were off to the races.
Yeah, very interesting. And I'm wondering, was the decision for so much of the film to take place in a car, was that kind of the idea from the beginning, or was that almost a creative decision that you had, Yuval, as the project was coming together?
No, the script was written in the car. There was even more in the car, but yeah, it's like probably like 35% in the car.
Typically when you're approaching a project like that, obviously we now do have volumes, and virtual production is used commonly for car process. But, what are some of the typical either challenges or things that are unique about scenes that take place in vehicles that kind of informed your approach to telling the story?
30-40 minutes of the movie take place in the car. It's all at night. It's traveling a specific route. And so we had a particular set of challenges right from the beginning that also directed the creative. We knew that we were going to be in this car for a good chunk of time, and we had to make it interesting. We had two characters mostly talking to each other with a few moments of action, but otherwise it was a lot of dialogue. And so our big task was, how do we make it authentic? How do we make it visually interesting? And how do we do that on this specific route that we travel on from Vegas to the outskirts of town? And so it was, the challenges were the areas where we could get creative.
what were some of those challenges, early on? I remember being on a bunch of calls where we were talking about how to capture plates and all this stuff. It was a big learning process, I know, for us at View as well. So maybe you could break down that process a little bit and what you ended up doing.
Yeah, so you have to capture a world first that's going to go on a volume. And you need to capture a world that's, one, true to the story, two, true to the action that happens in the story, and three, true to the route and to life. And so that's a tall order when you're shooting outside at night on mostly dark roads, and you're trying to create a sense of momentum, like you're leaving the city of Vegas. So those components all came together all at the same time, pretty close to the beginning of production. So we were prepping for the movie outside of the volume work and also prepping to shoot plates. And so it took a lot of internal conversation between Yuval and myself and Alan Unger and the rest of the creative team to figure out, like, what's the route? Where are we going to go? And so Yuval can also talk to this. We spent weeks probably hunting for specific locations.
Yeah, because you want to kind of that the stuff we shoot outside and inside was going to match, and that's kind of a very tricky thing, because we do have a car, actually second unit, riding the road, and you want to and you have certain events that happen, but close passes, and so you want to have the exact route, and that me and Steve and Alan were like really in the park for days. It's like just figuring out where they would really go, and then where the plates would be, and then where we're going to stage the second unit stuff outside, and how it's all going to match. It was like a big puzzle. And the fact that nobody knew what they were doing. That was the biggest.
Yeah, you get that route set. And I think it would be the same for a small car shoot. If it's just going down one road, or for our movie, multiple locations. You have to figure out where you're going to be, what time of day, what does it look like, does it fit the story? And then you have to figure out how you're going to capture it with a plate rig. And for our case, we used 8 A7S3s at low light ISO settings so that we could get the most dynamic amplitude out of the low light material that we were shooting, so that you could see something in the background. Because that was a big worry, was once we got outside of Vegas and we were heading towards the Henderson area, it's pretty dark aside for some overhead streetlights. And you don't want a car driving on a dark volume for 30 minutes with no changes in scenery. So that was a huge driver right from the beginning.
What's really interesting about that and watching the film is, having spent some time in Las Vegas, it feels familiar. It doesn't feel like you went off and you pulled some random plates from stock libraries or something. It really did feel custom made for your story, which, because it was. It's very easy to get car process wrong and looking fake and all that stuff. We've seen that 1,000 times. I'm sure that you're well aware of that. So I'm curious what your research method was going into the project. Were you looking at what others had done in volumes for car process, or I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your methodology.
Yeah, so I looked at Batman, the recent Greg Fraser film. I think there's a car sequence in there, and there's a motorcycle sequence. I looked at that for lighting. How can you create dynamic reflections on a vehicle that's constantly moving to give it the sense of movement? It's a testament really to Yuval and his particularness with the route and getting the exact plates from the exact locations to put on the wall that made this movie feel true to life and true to Vegas, because we started out with a plate company that was going to come in and provide plates for us. We asked for a bunch of material from them, and none of it passed muster. None of it was in low light night conditions. And last minute we made a pivot to shoot our own plates, and Yuval trusted me to go do that.
Yeah,
and it's a testament to your faith and your particularness, I think, Yuval.
We had to Steve rigged the car with 7 cameras. We called it the Batmobile. It really looked like a weird rigged car, and we just drove with it all night in Vegas, running red lights, which one of them is in the movie, by the way. and just riding around and trusting that, and we didn't have time, like trusting that what Steve was doing is gonna work. You know what I mean? Because we just like, we tried other solution that didn't work. It was last moment to do this, that it's gonna be stable enough, it's gonna look good, that it's gonna read well.
If you're gonna do car work and you want it to look good, you should shoot your own plates for it from the locations that the movie takes place in. If you're doing one quick car scene and you got to do it down and dirty and fast, you could get stock material, but it's not going to play the same. And I think that comes through subjectively. Certainly in our movie, there's so much time in the car that it wouldn't have flown at all. And I think the movie would have crumbled under the falseness of stock material.
I'm curious to know what led to the decision in the first place to choose virtual production. Obviously, there are different methods to car process. So why did you land on virtual production for that?
I don't think we could have. I mean, we had like 5 days to do like 36 minutes. And I think if we had to do it for real, like actually, outside, I think we would never get the amount of footage. And also it wouldn't look good. Like we wouldn't be able to move around and and explore different kind of setups and cover it the way I know. It's so, I mean, as a director, it's so hard to be in car stuff because it's like you're far away from the actress, you're speaking with the walkie-talkie. Oh, we're there, we have to go back, or the walkie-talkie doesn't work, or I can't hear you. It's a nightmare. Whereas if you are inside and you actually manage to make it look good, then you control everything, you can shoot a lot. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate what you've all said. I think that decision to use the volume was made before I came on the project, but it was the right decision because exactly as he said, we had limited time. If you're on a process trailer, it's expensive. The environment is difficult and dangerous for drivers, camera operators, for cast. In Vegas at that time, it would have been 120 degrees inside an air-conditioned car, sitting on a trailer, going in loops. You wouldn't have been able to get all the different locations that we got because we couldn't have afforded it as an indie production. The lighting would have been faulty as well. It wouldn't have been as dynamic, and I think like low-budget process work doesn't usually look very good either. Car work is just really hard, and the volume, if you prep it right, the volume like opens up the world to all kinds of new possibilities with camera angles and shooting fast with multiple cameras. It's just that prep work is really, really important.
Yeah, I was amazed and I'd love for you to expand on this a little bit, Steve, just the how you approached cinematography in the volume versus the way you would have done in a different process. Because I felt like the types of shots and setups that you did were very creative and very different from what I've seen from other films that use a lot of car scenes.
Yes, the volume allows us to get different types of angles than a trailer would, because you got a car on a trailer, you still can't see the ground, you can't see the tires. You actually probably have to go closer in than you would on volume. This was something that Yuval and I were talking about at the beginning, kind of experimenting with, was how wide could we get? How much of the world could we see before the volume wall became visible as like a fake wall, or before we saw the ground? And you were able to get pretty wide, which was something that we really wanted to be able to do to add some scope to the movie, to be able to show off a bit of the world. We were able to do some camera movement. There's a few shots in the movie where we're tracking in and pushing in on profile shots. The volume provides a backdrop and some reflections. You get a good top plate and you get some decent reflections off the dash of the car, but it's not enough, because a car in a real world night environment and a daytime environment is going to have just a whole plethora of moving reflections. And so we had to build those in with the lighting, and that meant going out on these scouts with Yuval and seeing where he wanted to shoot it, and contributing to what might be the best route for lighting, and then taking readings from those locations for color and intensity and mapping that into all of our LEDs so that it would match what we saw in the volume. And so it's like this 2-part process of you're lighting it like a movie, but you're also lighting it to match the world that's on the volume and getting those levels correct. And when you can do all that, I think you get some really cool results. Far more than we were even able to do, probably, since this was our first time doing it. But yeah, it really opens the door to unique stuff.
What about Yuval, from your perspective? I'm curious to know how you felt it was for Joel and Nick, being immersed in this environment, their process as actors. What was that experience like for you, working with them in the volume, but also how do you think it impacted their performance?
Being in the studio where you can actually, you're very comfortable, you can get out of the car, you can come back, you sit, it's easy to talk, it's easy to think, it's easy to reset. All that is very good for the actor, and they loved it. Joel, who was actually always the driver, there was issues that sometimes it was hard for him to get. It was hard for us to get a plate in front of him so he knows what he's, when he's supposed to turn. We always had to we sometimes forgot, and then we spent much more because he said, I need this. I need to see where I'm going. I need to see what's on the side so I can do the driving. And then we could have always made sure he has it. Even sometimes just putting a plasma TV in front of him if we didn't have a wall, but he always has to kind of understand as the one driving what's going on. Once we solved that issue, it was all just, again, much easier than being outside. Much, much easier, much more comfortable.
Very cool. Yeah, I remember that one point where we moved the TV in front of there, and it was almost like a video game. It was like, because that's the other thing you see when it's a green screen or it's a different type of process, is you see people doing this whole thing and they're completely disconnected from what's happening around them. Yeah,
it's like he was very subtle in how he did it, and also he could react to the environment. And and there was some drives. There's some drives that we did for real, like into the garage, out of the garage. We did some drives for real into the parking lot in the diner. So he was driving. He was actually, which movie? He said he did some movie, maybe the John Woo movie or something that he did recently. He learned how to be a precision driver. I don't know. He had it down.
What were, obviously we've been talking about virtual production. I'm curious to know more about what the experience was like for you all working with the team at View. It was our first feature film as a company, and so we were very thrilled to be working with you all and being a part of your vision. But curious to know what it was like working with the team and everyone there in Vegas.
It was was new for all of us. So that was the first, we all kind of came and how are we doing it? I don't know. Do you know? No. I don't know. Do you know? No. So it had a lot of that going. And then we all had to figure it out together. So it was a very good experience.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing. It was a learning curve for everyone. And what was great was we kept our foot on the gas in terms of what we wanted it to look like. We knew what we were aiming for. There are parts of the process that were unknown. We didn't know exactly how to get there. The amount of material and data that we brought into View from the plate cameras was extensive. And then it was just testing. And the great thing with the team at View, when we needed more help, they brought in more help. When we needed more expertise, they brought in more expertise. And by the time we were at day one shooting on the volume, everyone that they could have called was there to make sure that it went smooth for us. And it did. Once we decided that we nailed the look and it was working, then it was turnkey. And that was a wonderful moment for me, and I bet it was too for Yuval, that we could kind of relax and say, oh, this is working now. Now we can focus on performance.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe, I think at one point, they told me that you guys were getting through over 10 pages in one of the days. And that was kind of mind blowing to hear that level of efficiency. So great. It's, that's always exciting to know that you're able to be efficient, but it's less about the efficiencies and more about what that allows you to do from a creative level. Did you feel that at all? Either of you, working in virtual production, that you were able to spend a little more time on scenes or doing things without a time pressure in any way? Or I'm curious to hear any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I would say, it's a bit hard to separate out time pressure from a film set, because there's always a ticking clock. But I felt like once we got on the volume and it was working, that we were safe and that the looks were replicatable, and so replicatable, in fact, that we could come up with new ideas and we could talk about it, as you've all said, in an environment that was comfortable, and that, in my opinion, often looked better than what we would have gotten in the real world for our budget. And that was fantastic. And then the rest was just great acting and directing. I mean, the reason we probably got through 10 pages was because how dialed Yuval and Nick and Joel were, that they could just crush page after page like that. And so we were able to just bounce cameras around and shoot more angles than we'd even hoped. And for cinematographer, that's really exciting because you can start to dream, and that you can't always do that on set.
Now that you've had a pretty significant experience in virtual production, I'm curious to get both of your takes on how you see this technology continuing to be used into the future, either on your own productions or other filmmakers and storytellers. How do you see this technology continuing to advance filmmaking?
For me, I think there's a component of the volumes that are incredibly exciting, not just for driving, but for other types of moving shots, airplane work, aerial stunts, obviously sci-fi. You can do some interesting things with the volume. I also like the idea of volume walls as mobile entities that you can take to real locations and say, if you want a sunset all day on a 3rd-story building, you can stick an LED wall on a crane and put it up on a window, and now you don't have to fight the light all day. You could have one look for 12 hours, and that's going to save a ton of time, and it's going to allow you to get better performances. You get more takes, more angles. That's super exciting. I think for me, it's always going to be a combination of real world stuff and volume work, because the one difficult thing on volume is bringing in like the ambient texture, seeing wind, right? Or feeling you need your actors to look cold, or a variety of other things that happen in the real world. It takes more work to replicate that on a volume. So I think it's an incredible tool that should be used for specific things.
The thing we always say is we don't ever want people to notice the volume. And so exactly like you were saying, Steve, the more layers and things we can add, the better. But, at the end of the day, this is a tool for a filmmaker, and it's a tool for a lot of things, but, there's situations where, it's not the tool for everything. But yeah, it really is an exciting tool, in seeing what you all were able to create in our Las Vegas studio. It was really exciting for all of us here at View, and we were honored to play a small part in it, and look forward to working with you all again in the future. Really appreciate you taking the time and joining us for this conversation, and like I said, looking forward to working with you again in the future.
Same here. We'll be back. Good talking to you guys.